My mom always favored my sister and shamed me at Christmas dinner by calling me a wasting. But that night, I finally hit back in a way none of them saw coming and left them shocked. My name's Nathan. I'm 34, married, with 2 kids, and I work in IT consulting, which sounds a lot fancier than it is. I've never been the golden child. That title belongs to my younger sister, Leah. Ever since she popped out smiling and wrapped my parents around her little finger, I was the serious one, the moody one, the one who, according to my mom, just doesn't know how to lighten up and be part of the family. I used to try. I really did. But over the years, those small digs and sideways comments from my mom and sister wore me down. My wife, Ellie, always told me, "Nate, you're not imagining it." But I kept giving them chances because that's what you're supposed to do, right? They're family. This story starts last Christmas. Ellie didn't want to go. She had that look in her eye, the one that said, "This is going to end badly." But she stayed quiet because she knew how hard I was trying to make peace. We've been covering some of Leah's expenses for the last couple of years. She lost her job, had a rough breakup, and suddenly couldn't pay her rent. My parents swooped in with emotional support but not a dime of financial help. So, of course, we stepped in quietly. I paid her credit cards, helped with her lease, and even bought groceries through an online delivery service so she wouldn't feel ashamed if someone saw her using a food pantry. At the time, it didn't even feel like a choice. She was my sister. She said she just needed a little time. Time turned into 18 months. We pulled into my parents' driveway on Christmas Eve. Snow was falling in those perfect movie flakes, and the house was glowing with fairy lights. From the outside, it looked like a holiday card. Inside, it was more like a live-action audition for a toxic family sitcom. The moment we walked in, Mom gave me that pursed smile that didn't reach her eyes. Leah was already sipping wine on the couch in a red dress that looked designer. She saw us, smirked, and waved lazily. Dinner was tense. Every time Ellie tried to speak, Mom talked over her. Leah kept asking my kids, ages 7 and 5, if they'd finally learned to behave in public. I bit my tongue so hard during dessert I tasted blood. Then the toast happened. Mom stood up, glass of white wine in hand, and said, "Here's to family, to new beginnings, and to accepting that sometimes you spend thousands raising a child and end up with a disappointment." The silence was brutal. Ellie's hand slid under the table and squeezed mine. I didn't move at first, just stared at my mom while my brain played catch-up with what I'd just heard. Then I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and sent her exactly $1. I turned the screen to her and said, "Debt settled." The room was ice. Leah let out this dramatic fake gasp, like she was watching a soap opera. "Oh my God, Nathan," she said, drawing out every syllable. "Do you have to be so dramatic? No wonder nobody likes you at work. You always take everything so personally." Then she laughed and looked right at Ellie. "Next year, do us all a favor and don't bring your pathetic little family." You lower the tone. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just took a slow sip of my drink, looked her straight in the eye, and said, calmly, to my sister, "Living like a queen on my money until tonight." That's when I saw her face twitch, the moment where her brain caught up to mine and started doing the math. We left without saying goodbye, just stood up, gathered the kids, and walked out. Nobody followed us. The entire ride home was silent, except for the sound of my son humming Christmas music in the back seat. Ellie didn't ask what I meant. She knew. She knew I'd been keeping receipts, keeping track, holding the line. And I think she also knew that line had finally snapped. When we got home, I sat down in the office and opened up every account, banking, utilities, subscriptions, shared credit cards, everything tied to my name or my business. And Leah's access, gone. I reversed the transfers. I froze the joint cards, called my bank, and flagged every automatic transaction from her zip code. I shut it all down. I didn't feel angry. I felt clean, like something had finally been cut loose. I slept better that night than I had in months. The next morning, my phone had already started buzzing before I even brushed my teeth. 27 missed calls, 14 voicemails, and one very long text from Leah that started with WTF and ended with, "You can't do this to me." I hadn't even poured my coffee when my mom called. I let it ring. That's when Leah sent the last message. It was just a screenshot of her bank app, a giant red zero, and a declined Netflix charge. Underneath it, she wrote, "You're a monster." That was the moment I knew she still didn't get it. She still didn't understand that generosity isn't a right. It's a choice, one I'd made too many times already. But what really set everything in motion wasn't what she said next. It was what she did 2 hours later when she showed up at my house with my mom and tried to force her way inside. I heard the pounding on the door before I even saw the car pull up. It was still early, maybe 9 a.m., and I was in the kitchen making pancakes for the kids. Ellie looked up from her coffee, gave me a questioning look, and I just knew. I opened the curtain and saw them, my mom, arms crossed in that way she thinks makes her look dignified, and Leah, standing beside her, red-faced, dressed like she hadn't even bothered to change out of yesterday's outfit. Her mascara was smudged, hair pulled into a messy bun. She definitely didn't mean to be stylish. They weren't just mad, they were humiliated, and somehow that was my fault. I opened the door and didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Leah didn't wait. She stormed in like she owned the place. "What is wrong with you?" she snapped. "I tried to buy groceries this morning, and my card declined. Then my Uber didn't go through. Then my phone bill." Mom followed right behind her, pinching the bridge of her nose like she was the victim here. "Nathan, whatever this tantrum is, stop it now. This is Christmas. You've made your point, and now you're being cruel." Ellie stood up from the kitchen table, calm, quiet, but her eyes were sharp. "Actually," she said, "he hasn't made his point yet. You just haven't been listening for the last 3 years. Leah spun on her. "Nobody was talking to you." Ellie didn't flinch. "No, you never do. But I'm talking now." I felt a chill go down my spine. Ellie rarely got involved directly. She always supported me privately, always played peacemaker when things got ugly. But this time, she was standing her ground in our home. "Do you have any idea," she said, her voice steady, "how much he's done for you? Paid your rent, covered your credit card debt, bought you groceries while you shopped online like a Kardashian, and not once did you say thank you. Not once." "That's not true," Leah started. "Isn't it?" I cut in, finally speaking. "Tell me the last time you paid for your own life, Leah. The last time you didn't send me a sob story the minute you overdrafted on another handbag." Mom stepped between us like she was breaking up a bar fight. "All right, enough. This is still your sister. You don't air family business like this. And as her older brother, it's your duty to help when things are hard." That word duty lit something in me I'd been trying to ignore for years. It was the same word she'd used when she guilt-tripped me into co-signing Leah's lease. The same word when she asked me to be a man and cover Dad's hospital bill without telling anyone. It was actually Leah who caused the insurance to lapse by never sending in the paperwork she promised she would. "Mom," I said slowly, "you raised me to be responsible, to take care of others. I did that for years for all of you. But you never taught Leah to do the same. And now she thinks my money is hers by default." "She's family," Mom snapped. "So am I," I said. "But apparently, I'm the disappointment you toasted to last night that shut her up." Leah scoffed, arms flailing. "So what? You're cutting me off completely? Throwing me out like trash because of one joke? That toast was Mom's idea, by the way." I just laughed. Ellie crossed her arms. "You didn't just laugh. You added a comment about our kids being low class. You told us not to come back, and now you want access to our accounts again." "I didn't mean it," Leah shouted. "God, you people are so dramatic. You really think I'd be living like this if I had other options?" "You have options," I said. "You just never choose them. You only ever choose the easy one." "Me." She froze. That was the first time I'd ever said it so plainly. The truth hung in the air, thick and ugly. She looked at me, blinking, lips parted. But no words came out. My mom stepped forward and reached for my arm. "Nathan," she said quietly. "She's your sister, and we're your family. This is vindictive." That word stung. Vindictive. As if I were doing this out of malice. As if I hadn't been swallowing insult after insult. Debt after debt for years just to keep some warped version of family peace alive. "No," I said. "It's a boundary. And the difference between the two is that this one's long overdue." I walked over to the hallway table, picked up a white envelope and handed it to Leah. She looked confused, then she opened it. Inside was a neat breakdown. Every transaction I'd made for her in the last 18 months. Rent payments, utility bills, credit, card debt, subscription fees, even a few petty purchases like Uber rides and random charges from high-end beauty stores. It was organized, color-coded, dated. There was a final number at the bottom. She blinked at it. "I'm not asking for it back," I said. "That's not the point. I just wanted you to see it, to see exactly how much of my life I've handed to you." She went pale. My mom tried to tear the paper from her hand, but Leah held on to it like it burned. "You kept track," she whispered. "Because I had to. Because I knew deep down I'd need proof someday. That I wasn't crazy. That I didn't imagine how deep this went." They didn't speak. For the first time in my life, they had no comeback. Finally, I opened the door. "You can go now," I said. Merry Christmas. They left. But that wasn't the end of it. Not even close. Later that night, I got a call, not from Leah, but from someone else entirely, someone I hadn't heard from in over a year. And what he said on the phone made me realize this went way deeper than I thought. The call came just after 11 p.m. I was in the living room, lights dimmed, watching Ellie wrap one last gift for our youngest. The kids were asleep upstairs, and the house had finally settled into that warm holiday quiet. My phone buzzed once, lighting up the screen. I almost didn't pick up. The number wasn't saved, but something about the area code made my stomach turn. It was Alan, my cousin. I hadn't spoken to Alan in over a year, not because we'd fought, but because he'd quietly distanced himself from the family drama, especially after what happened at his mother's funeral. That day, Mom and Leah tried to redirect the post-service lunch into a pitch for Leah's new business idea. Alan didn't even respond. He just stood up, walked out, and never looked back. So when I answered the call and heard his voice, low and cautious, I knew it wasn't a social check-in. "Hey, Nate. Sorry to call this late. You got a minute?" "Yeah, of course. Everything all right?" He paused, like he was debating whether to say what he needed to say. "I heard Leah showed up at your place this morning with your mom." I sat up straighter. "Yeah. How do you know that?" "Because she called me right after." That gave me pause. Leah hadn't spoken to Alan in over 2 years, not since she borrowed $3,000 from him, allegedly to fix her car, and then ghosted him when he asked for a repayment plan. "She called you," I repeated. "Yeah," Alan said. "Said you cut her off. Said you humiliated her. She was crying. Honestly, it took me a second to even believe it was her. Then she asked if I could wire her money to cover a few bills until she gets back on her feet." I rubbed my temple. Unbelievable. "That's not why I called, though," Alan said, his voice hardening. "I asked her why she didn't just ask your mom or your dad, and she laughed. Said they're tapped out. Said she's been borrowing from them for years and everything they've got is because of you." My blood ran cold. Alan went on. "She told me your parents' house is basically being paid with your help, that your dad refinanced a loan to help you with your business, but the money actually went to her." I felt like the floor tilted. "Wait," I said slowly, "my dad took out a loan? You didn't know?" Alan said. "She sure made it sound like you did." I stood up and walked to the window, heart thudding. I had helped my dad once, maybe 3 years ago, when he needed some upfront cash after retiring early. But I never told him to take a loan, and I certainly never knew anything about refinancing. "She also said something weird," Alan added, "that she was supposed to be protected no matter what, that there was an agreement." My voice was hoarse. "What kind of agreement?" Alan sighed. "I don't know." She was being vague, but she said, "Nathan made a promise to Mom and Dad. If they ever needed anything, he'd make sure they were covered. That's why I'm not worried." Then she laughed, said, "He owes us." I didn't even respond because suddenly all the puzzle pieces I'd been ignoring fell into place. The repeated requests for small help. The guilt trips from my mother when I hesitated. The reason why every time I offered to teach Leah how to manage a budget, she'd snap, "That's not my job." The monthly payments my dad had stopped mentioning altogether. The weird silence whenever I'd asked why Leah's name was never on anything despite co-owning things with my parents. It was a setup, a structure, a long con wrapped in family guilt. Alan spoke again. "Look, man, I'm not trying to stir things up, but you deserve to know." Something about the way she said it. It felt rehearsed, like this has been going on way longer than you realize. "Yeah," I said, my throat dry. "I'm starting to see that." Alan paused. "You okay?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But thanks for telling me." "Really?" "Anytime," he said. "And Nate, be careful. I don't think she's done yet." I hung up and just stood there, staring into the quiet street outside. Snow had started falling again, soft and peaceful and utterly at odds with what was now spinning in my head. Ellie came over and wrapped her arms around me. "What happened?" I told her everything, and for a few seconds after, she just stood still, her cheek against my shoulder. "I knew they were bad with money," she said finally. "But this is a whole other level." And it was. This wasn't just petty entitlement. This was financial manipulation on a scale I hadn't even noticed until it was spelled out for me by someone outside the bubble. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I pulled out every document I had, old emails, transaction, histories, screenshots of messages from my mom and Leah. I printed everything, made a binder. I wasn't sure why, not yet, but I needed to see the full picture. I needed to know just how deep this went. And as I started flipping through it, something stood out. One small payment labeled consulting gift from my business account. It was from 6 months ago. I didn't remember making it. That's when I realized someone else had access to my business funds. I didn't speak. I just stared at the screen, heart slamming in my chest. The payment was small, $1,600, but it was the memo line that stopped me cold, consulting gift. And the account it came from? One of my LLC's secondary cards. A card I hadn't touched in over a year because I kept it in a drawer at my parents' house for emergencies. Or at least I thought I had. I ran back through old emails, then into my bank's interface. There it was. A pattern. Small, infrequent withdrawals going back 10 months. A few hundred here, a few hundred there, sometimes $300, sometimes $700, always under the threshold that would trigger a call from the bank. Always vague memos, transport, setup, help, service fee. I'd miss them because they weren't big enough to seem alarming, and because I trusted my family to respect boundaries. That was my first real mistake. I looked up at Ellie. They've been siphoning from the business. Her eyebrows pulled together slowly, like it hurt to process. They what? They've been using my business card. Someone got hold of it. It was supposed to be at my parents' house, but I never retrieved it after the last time I visited. I thought it was safe. I paused. It's not just Leah. I think Mom knew, maybe even Dad. We sat in silence for a while. My mind was racing, trying to piece everything together. The lies, the small favors, the gaslighting, the guilt trips disguised as holiday toasts. And worst of all, the casual confidence with which Leah lived off of me, believing it was her birthright. I spent the next 3 days reviewing every single account. I called my bank, my accountant, and even a lawyer friend from college. The evidence was clear. Leah had accessed the card. Most charges were tied to a recurring IP address matching her apartment complex. She'd paid off her beauty school tuition with my funds, bought clothes, dinners, even a hotel stay at a luxury spa. My parents hadn't touched the card themselves, but the payments they were making on their home? Those came from a side arrangement routed through a joint account I'd helped open years ago to help Dad retire early. So yes, they all knew. I'll be honest. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. The betrayal hit in waves, and each one felt colder than the last. These weren't strangers. These were the people I'd grown up with, shared dinners with, held in the hospital. People who had, at one time, claimed they loved me. What kind of love does this? I gave myself until New Year's Eve to finish my plan. I wanted one final gesture, one final closing chapter. And if they wanted to call it vindictive, fine. But for the first time, I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for me, for my wife, and for my kids, who deserve to grow up without watching their father be used like a personal ATM. I waited until the family's annual New Year's dinner. Same house, same traditions. But this time, I didn't walk in with gifts. I didn't show up with Ellie or the kids. I came alone, dressed clean, calm, and holding a black folder under my arm. They looked surprised to see me. Mom gave me a tight smile. Leah looked like she'd spent the past week pretending none of it had happened. She waved at me like we were still in junior high and hadn't had a single conversation about theft and manipulation. Nate, Mom said, we weren't sure you'd come. It's been such a weird week. Miscommunications, tension. But it's good to end things on a fresh note. I smiled politely. I won't be staying long. Leah poured herself more wine and kicked her heels up on the coffee table. Oh, come on. You're not still mad, are you? It's New Year's. Let's start clean. All that money stuff. Water under the bridge. I stared at her. And that was when I realized she genuinely thought nothing was going to happen. I'd vented my little tantrum and now, like always, would return to the role of passive provider. I opened the folder. Inside were several things. A printout of every unauthorized transaction from my business card. A copy of the card's access log. A notarized letter revoking all family members' financial access to my accounts, and a formal notice that I'd reported the charges. Oh, and a copy of a cease and desist letter drafted by my lawyer stating that if any of them tried to contact or involve themselves in my financial affairs again, legal action would follow. I placed the folder on the coffee table. I'm not here to fight, I said. I'm here to let you know what happens next. All of this, I gestured to the folder, has already been filed. The fraud report, the bank freeze, and the audit on both personal and business accounts. Leah laughed. You're being so dramatic. You're seriously pressing charges over a few $100? Thousands, I corrected. And yes, because it wasn't your money, and you knew it. Mom stood up, arms crossed, her voice cold. You're going to ruin this family over money. You ruined this family over money the second you used guilt to justify theft, I said. You made your choice. This is mine. Leah started to panic, flipping through the papers, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. You can't. There's no proof. This is harassment. No, I said. It's accountability. I turned to leave, but before I walked out the door, I said one last thing. I've spent most of my life believing that being the responsible one meant keeping the peace. It doesn't. It just made me your safety net. That ends tonight, and I left. That night, I sat with Ellie and the kids by the fire. We didn't talk about what had happened. We didn't need to. We were finally free. Over the next few weeks, Leah tried to reach out, first through angry texts, then through more emotional ones, and finally through mutual friends. I never replied. Mom tried once too, leaving a voicemail crying, saying how this would tear the family apart. But I'd learned something powerful. If a relationship survives only because one person allows themselves to be used, it's not a relationship. It's a trap. The fraud case went through. I didn't press full charges. I just wanted the bank to close the card and investigate the breach, which they did. Leah lost her access. My parents had to start paying their own bills again. And me? I kept working, kept living, and finally started building a future that wasn't tied to the past. I still love the idea of family. But now I know real family doesn't take, it builds, it supports, and most of all, it respects the hand that's reaching out. Mine had been bitten too many times, and I wasn't reaching anymore.